Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Rebuilding from the foundations, personally and also in our society. We have very powerful accounts today, or stories, presentation of realities in human life that are very difficult, very painful, very endemic. And we have a lot to do to gain new solid ground. The weatherman in my little phone, the weatherman fits into my phone. He says that it's going to be raining from 6 a.m., which is just now, until 8 a.m. And in the last 15-20 minutes, I've been looking at the sky, and it might happen or it mightn't happen. So who knows? But I don't want to go too far away so that we can keep operating even if it rains. So we have our usual stroll and chat. So we'll stay here in Magla. We'll walk a little bit over and back here. There's no prospect of seeing the sun, although it's surely risen for the last 10 minutes, I would say. The water is a little bit dirty here, so sorry about that. But I heard the waves are moving, and they weren't 10 minutes ago. It was very interesting yesterday chatting with the guy who took us out on the boat. His name was Hud, and he's 31 years of age. Since he was 10 years of age, he was totally immersed in the life of the sea with his dad, and probably before that. And he really knows a lot about it. But he said that in 10 minutes, it's possible for a storm to brew in the Sea of Galilee from his experience. Very casual, regular Jewish guy, Some people would say, how is it possible that such a calm sea could have a big storm in it that would threaten life? Well, it's his experience, and he's only 31 years old. But I just heard some noise, and I was wondering if it's fish here. Sometimes it could be mating time for some of the fish, but it could also be just wave movement that's going on. And then when that's happening, you can see the fish, and they're very active. Huge fish here, like especially the catfish. He was telling us yesterday about the mating of the tilapia. Well, anyway, we got very big themes today, people. Very big themes. Two very dramatic stories, life and death stories, and rescue stories, both of them. And they both have a lot in common, and that's why they're together. And I'll never forget, actually, the last year on this day for this liturgy, I celebrated under this olive tree here. Let's go over there. Women are at the center of this story, but also good men and bad men. And you know the stories, they're very famous. Very famous. We have the story of Susanna in Babylon, married to Joachim, who's an extraordinary man of repute and justice and wisdom and counsel. The entire community goes to him for advice. Very rich man, beautiful garden, pools in the garden. That kind of thing in the Middle East is a big deal, So he was pinnacle of society, condition of exile, Babylon. That's the setting of the story. Scholarly debate usually puts this book of Daniel as very late literature in the Hebrew scriptures, in the Bible, very late literature. Some put it even 160 or so years before Christ. There are different reasons for all that, and it's not the object of our conversation to go into this academic side, but it's just interesting to note this. And since it's recent literature as well, it's known, it's 150, 200 years before Christ. And that's about the beginnings of Magdala as well, by the way. Magdala, Hellenic town, especially the part of the Franciscans over there. Since we have time here, we're not going far. Let's just go up on this mound and you can see there. Sometimes it's easier to run up a hill just to get the momentum. This is a dump up here, okay, so don't be shocked. Construction dump, and it's a big pile of clay from the archaeology, and these are provisional situations because our site is still in development, so that's my justification. So here you see a tower, a basalt tower over here. This is the Franciscan property behind this fence here. And they have done such a service in the Holy Land, identifying, acquiring, and developing sites all over the country. Like Nazareth is so developed, and we can thank the Franciscans and all the people who have supported and helped them in their work there. And the same goes for Mount Tabor, and the same goes for the Holy Sepulchre, and the same goes for, well, the Holy Sepulchre is a different story. It was pretty identified long before the Franciscans. And the same goes for and the Crusaders also had Mount Tabor. That was the traditional site, but the Franciscans have had such a role there. And for example, that whole new development there, and also there's a community there that is recovering addiction people, substance abuse people, and there the Transfiguration is having its effect. And the Franciscans have a hand in all of that, doing marvelous work, So they actually bought this site well over 100 years ago and began to develop the archaeology. And that's a Hellenic town. That's why I came over here to point that out. It's a Hellenic town. And so it's the time also probably of the book of Daniel. Just to put things in perspective. Hellenic means post-Alexander the Great. Hey guys, did anybody tell me, maybe they did and I wasn't paying attention, I didn't plug in my microphone. Maybe you missed everything I said up to now. Did you miss everything I said up to now, or was I semi-audible? Was I at least understood in my comments? Or was everything totally lost on you? Can one or two people just chime in there and tell me if I was understood in the comments I made in the last, what would it be? In the last 7 or 8 minutes. Anybody hear me? Anybody understood me? Okay, you heard me. That's good. That's good. I'm happy. There we got a comment. No, we heard you well. Oh, yes, we heard you well. Okay, good. So there we are. There are the hills of Lebanon. Since we're up here in the height, you can see them there over the brow of the hill behind Migdal. Migdal is the new town here of ancient Magdala. And then you can see way over there on the left, in the center of the screen right now, from those hills you're looking into Lebanon, all the way across here. And there's no way we see Mount Hermon today because it's just all hazed in. And this is Magdala, in case nobody knew. And then we have the Sea of Galilee here. And then we're looking across, we can't see much beyond the first level of the Golan here. But just beyond that, in normal visibility, you can see a hill in Syria from here, not very far away. If there was no problem with borders and everything, you could drive there in a little over an hour to that hill inside Syria. And there we have Tiberias peeping over the hill there. And Mount Arbel. So now we just did a geographical recap for you there. But most of you know this terrain very well. And then our excavations here at Magdala. Good. So let's get back on the story, because the story needs a lot of talking. And a couple of ideas came up to mind this morning that might be a way to approach this whole thing. I remember last year when we had this mass down here at this olive tree, right there at that olive tree. And we had a terrible problem. We were just learning. It was the beginning of the lockdown. And we were beginning a more intensive live stream effort for Mass, and we were doing some Masses outdoors, and then learning about the wind at that time of day doesn't work very well, and then problems of how to hook up the phone and put it in there, and And the mast was sideways, so I was standing horizontally for you, and the tree was horizontal and everything, and so it was a bit of a disaster. And I'm not sure if we got it corrected. We interrupted and tried to correct it, but that's the way it's still up on Facebook. I haven't gone there for ages, but it was there. So it's the Monday of the 5th week of Holy Week. Of Lent. Monday of the 5th week of Lent, and next Sunday is Palm Sunday, so it's the Monday before Palm Sunday. And we have these readings every year of Susanna and her major troubles, and she was a very beautiful woman, married to this very wealthy guy who was an incredible man of wisdom and counsel. And 2 judges had been appointed to serve the people's needs, and they had a lot of evil in their hearts. You know, it's a rough time when judges are supposed to do justice, right? And not just to do justice in their decisions, in their analysis, in their considerations and in their decisions about cases, but also they should be people of justice, because how can you give just decisions if you're a person that's corrupt? And that sometimes happens. So another category of people we should pray for a lot, I think, and maybe we don't do it enough, is to pray for the justices. Pray for those who are in charge of delivering justice in society. Just decisions where there are disputes and where criminal behavior has happened and all these things. And, you know, humanity will always have these issues. We had them since Adam was a boy, as my dad would say. You know, Cain and Abel, and Adam and Eve themselves, and then we have it down until our very own day. In fact, this past week I've heard of a very, very sad case, very similar to the 2 stories in the Gospel and Susanna, where these judges, you know, they go in the garden and they hide and they wait for her, and they know her habit of going to bathe in the garden, and you know the rest of the story. But that's not the end of the story, because then she shrieks and the people come, so they accuse her of having been with somebody else, a young man. And then they give testimony in public, and she is up for condemnation. She's going to be executed, and she cries out to God. And then the whole crowd has approved of her condemnation, even though they were like thoroughly ashamed and disgusted, because she had been such a noble person of noble repute and noble behavior and a good person, which is completely unjustly condemned. And then God moves the spirit of Daniel. It's the book of Daniel story. And he speaks up and he says, I'm not part of this. I can't go along with this injustice. So then they call him up, and he hears the 2 men to give their accounts separately in isolation from each other, and they give very oh, look, we have a visitor here last night. Here's the tent, so we let the people sleep. I'm not sure if it's 1 or more. So we'll just back off here. Just a little bit of water sound for you here before we back off completely. Soldier loves waves and biting at waves, but they're not strong enough for her to do her antics. So let's continue with our story, because we have a lot to digest here. So anyway, then she's freed, and the 2 are punished with the death penalty which they had planned for her. So there's great relief, obviously. Salvation has come for her through this young man. And the gospel story is pretty similar in another way, that You have people very righteously appearing very righteous before the law, very serious people, respected people. And a particular woman is found in adultery at the Mount of Olives where Jesus is at the time. And they bring the case to Jesus and said, Moses said we should stone this woman to death. And that's the famous thing about the writing and in the sand, And the people start going away, starting with the oldest, the ones who were without sin, let them throw the first stone, So there's an awful lot of things to say about all of this, people, a lot of things. And I want to tell you one more story that'll it could make you sick actually, it's a horrible story, but I won't tell you too many details. But people we know, beautiful young women who were volunteers and co-workers, not here, in another project we have, at least one or two of them with their friends they're from Latin America, and they went to a place called an antro, so that's like an underground disc, what do you call these things, disco. And when they were there, they were given something to drink, but it was terribly laced, and the end of the story is terrible. They're still alive, but the worst things were done to them. And they're very broken right now, very sad. It's very tough in the families. And who knows if those guys will ever be found that did that. So it's an ongoing problem, The Babylon exile is 5-6 centuries before Christ, is the setting of the story we have in the book of Daniel, even if the book might be... Hope you're still there. We might have lost some people in a moment there. Hope you can come back. Are you still there? Good. Some people hang in there. Sorry for the people that got lost. The Wi-Fi connection got interrupted here, and I'm sorry about that. But what women have suffered at the hands of cruel men over the centuries is terrible, over the millennia. And it still goes on today. Selfish people. It still goes on today. And this is horrible, terrible. And we need to go through the phase of asking for forgiveness, for making amends. But the thought that came to my heart today was, let's approach this from another angle. What are we going to do about it now? What are we going to do for the next generation of girls that are in kindergarten now? What are we going to do for the girls that are in primary school now? What are we going to do for the girls in secondary school now? Because this is the world they're coming into. How are they going to be prepared? And we can look at what's going on in society, and there's a lot of stuff going on in society. And there's a massive destruction of the family. And the family is where relationships are learned. The role of man and woman as parents, as spouses. The faithful love that's open to life, that brings life to the world, which entails lots of challenges and lots of service, lots of kindness, lots of self-giving. Like the themes we had yesterday, laying down your life for the other. The big message of the gospel yesterday we talked about at the Mass. Laying down your life for the other. This is family life. And a thought came to me today. One of the big issues here underlying all of the abuse is that people exercise a dominion that's not theirs. They take dominion over people. Like those two judges actually intruded in the garden that was private. They didn't need to be in there. And they approached her, and she was not their spouse. How could she be? Impossible, And so they were taking dominion. They were exercising a dominion they didn't have. Physically, they could overpower somebody. But since then, she cried out, and the people from the house showed up immediately. All the servants came. It was a very high society family, and so they had lots of employees, and they came immediately. And so the guys then went into accusation mode. So they had a dominion in the people of great honor as judges, and they leveraged that dominion to condemn her by calumny and by accusation, complete falsehood. You know, the synagogues were also the seat of judgment for communities. St. Paul was scourged in a synagogue. Justice was handed down to him according to the decision that was made on that day. Not here. It was in I forget which town it was in. When he came to Europe, first he was judged, and I'm not sure if that was in the synagogue, but I don't think so. It was in another moment. So they took on a dominion that they shouldn't have. They exercised. They didn't have that dominion. They didn't have that right. Let me walk you up through the new construction site we have here for the visitor center. Everything is tossed up here. People used to walk down here before. So we're trying to fix up the visitor center now. We finally got all the permissions granted that we need to do. And we're taking out the containers, and we're rebuilding here an appropriate visitor center, which won't be the definitive one either, because we have big plans to build a big visitor center over here, God willing, if the Lord blesses that initiative. And if the people help us to do it. But here right now we're doing this one. So we just needed to redo this completely. One of the big problems here was that this was too close to the road for the, it grew first of all just as a little cover, and then it grew gradually, but the authorities asked us to move it back from the road here. So that's the bottom line of why we had to move it. We couldn't continue there. And then there were all complications with permissions from archaeology side and from authority side and city side, and finally that's worked out here. So little by little things will be restructured here for you when you come back, God willing. So all the work that goes into this. So I think that's what we have to do in our society today. We have to rebuild. Dominion is something God gave us. He said, have dominion over the world and develop it. But we use dominion selfishly. And how do we re-educate our society? How do we rebuild our society? This is part of a building project. This is kind of the way our society is going. You know, it's a lot of stuff. Look at our good mosaics here. They're placed here for the moment. These are just replicas, right? So, how do we rebuild society? And we can lose dominion, true dominion, by exercising horrible dominion. We can lose dominion of ourselves. And the basic building block of dominion, there are lots of them. You know, if I want to do this work here and we don't have these big machines, then it's going to be a very difficult process. These machines make it a lot easier. But if I don't know how to start the engine of one of these diggers, these backhoes, I could start the engine, but I mightn't be able to operate the backhoe, right? So it's amazing the dominion that the human being has accomplished. And we even see that here in Magla with the water systems for the mikvaot. This is an amazing system of dominion over water. The hydroengineering here was of an incredible degree 2,000 years ago. And look at all the stuff that's here in this machine. The guys who built it have dominion over the earth. And this is extraordinary dominion, marvelous dominion. And it takes a lot of the heavy labor out of life, because that shovel can lift, you know, half a ton or a ton of sand or stone. And this digger here, imagine if the men had to do it with a shovel and a pick. or with their hands before they ever invented a shovel or pick. I mean, I did a lot of work at home on the farm with a shovel and pick. And then sometimes we had a machine like that come in, and it was a big help to open up a new road or whatever. So, dominion. And then we have dominion of knowledge. Like, for example, this morning I have enough knowledge of the weather. I could have gone because it didn't rain, look. But it looked like it might rain. So I said, okay, I'm going to play it safe and stay here in Magdala. So we have dominion of knowledge. Like somebody knows code, so they can handle changes in Facebook much better than I can, because I have no clue about code and I have to fumble around until I get it, because it took me by surprise a couple of days ago and I'm still learning. But now I realize that I have to go to the status button, and then I get an option there, and one of them is to go live. Okay, so I got that fixed. Now I have greater dominion over the Facebook, the use of this platform so that we can communicate in the morning. So dominion over ourselves. And they were talking about habits. So let's say, I'm looking for my phone. Well, where did I put it? How many people are looking for their phone? Where did I put it? But if you always put it in the same place, you'll always find it. And so habits, doing constant good things in the same way all the time, lead to give us ease in operating our lives. Or order, that's order, the habit of order, punctuality. If I have a habit of being punctual, then first of all I'm going to be on time for stuff, but then I'm also going to be a socially more pleasant person, because the impunctual person is very unpleasant socially. They always mess up your plans. It's a social burden. Let's go the rough way today here. So we could actually go over and explore the water channel that's coming from the mikveh, since we're not going to see sun, I don't think, and we're almost finished. Or we leave that for another day, because there is actually very little time left. Let me focus on the topic. So then the virtues are the dominion interiorly. So somebody could have an exuberant sexual impulse, but if they have the virtue of chastity, which is habitual modesty of the eyes, it's habitual behavior of respect to their own body, it's habitual dominion of their own imagination. I cannot be imagining all kinds of sexual scenarios and hope to have it easier to be a chaste person, a Christ-like person. How can I do that? I'm on the one side pumping in gasoline right beside the fireplace, and I'm hoping on the other hand that I'm not going to have my house burned down. So, and there's the virtue of prudence, to measure. The measure of all the virtues is prudence. And these guys, played it totally dangerous, because they put themselves in a situation of temptation. But their hearts were already down that road. That's what they wanted. And that's where our society is today, in huge swaths. That's where the entertainment world is, in huge swaths. You could have a movie about making cars, and it has to have stuff in it that's sexual. Why? If you're able to sell a nice car because it has its own qualities, why do you need to put out a half-naked woman in front of it? And there's some great advertising companies that have marvelous high-level, high-ground advertising, and they don't need to stoop there. They don't need to play with the human passions in a cheap way. So let's say the society refuses to change its patterns, then what am I going to do? How am I going to protect my soul? How am I going to have dominion and not lose it? How am I not going to become a slave of my passions? People, we need to get to the root of these things if we're going to bring hope for greater respect and protection and the well-being of millions of girls today. And the destruction of a girl is also the destruction of the guy. Because a guy that does these things loses his ability for marriage unless there's redemption. Unless he goes through a whole path of convalescence morally, spiritually, sexually, how he relates, how he sees others. It's incredible the assault people attempt on people, the corruption of morals, the assault even on people that are married. and somebody goes after somebody that's married. You can't do that. Where's the virtue? Where is the godlikeness, made in the image and likeness of God? Okay, there's dominion, because I'm going to take control and I'm going to take ownership of this person. I'm going to bust this marriage. Please, So I know I'm talking to the choir. You guys are in a whole different place. But we're all involved, and we're in a spirit of solidarity. We're all in this together, people. And it's what movies you watch and what stuff, you just change the channel. You don't go there on the internet, because we're swimming in the sump. It's amazing the intensity of the offering of this type of behavior, which is counter-human, counter-healthy society, counter-healthy psychology, counter-healthy life, counter the flourishing of humanity. And we're all in this together. And we start by praying, asking for the grace that the light can break through the cloud at some point, that the light will come. Praying, because prayer is so powerful. No prayer is ever wasted. And there's a grace in every circumstance. Even if this is the time we're living in, then we're here because we have a mission. It's the conversations. It's first of all the personal behavior. It's the personal interior consecration of my heart to be godlike. And it doesn't mean we need to go out and make huge protests. Those in our times in politics is just not the way. I'm not sure if it's the way. There are people that are called to do that, and maybe they have that vocation. But the sun is going to come out again. But we're all going to be involved in helping that happen. We'll keep talking about this, people, this evening at the Mass as well. And I've gone overboard again with time, so forgive me. God bless you. Isn't it great the sun came out to finish up this talk, because there's hope. We're filled with hope. That's one thing, is that even in the Roman Empire that went totally downhill, those communities of disciples living their life of faith, of hope, of charity, of witness, transformed the empire. And many times that wave of corruption even flows over the baptized. But the sun will come out again. God is faithful to his covenant, like we were talking about yesterday. He will not let us down. And he will speak in our hearts, and we have to open them. God bless you. Thank you for listening to me. Got a bit hot on this today. See you later, alligators. Be good.